No, I think we need the sheet. It's 7 o'clock, and if you haven't signed up yet to speak at the public hearing, please do so. The sheet will be removed in a minute.
Anybody? Anybody? Going once?
Are we missing some counselors?
Talk louder. Talk louder.
We're ready to convene the public hearing. If everyone would like to take their seat, please. No problem. Okay, it is Monday, January 27th, 7:01 p.m., and I would like to call the public hearing of the Ordinance Committee to order. We have one speaker. Sonia Devitt. We have a 3-minute time limit. However, we're late tonight, so just
Thank you.
take your time.
Excuse me. Sonia Devitt, 545 Hilltop Drive here in Stratford. And I first want to say what a nice article that was about Stratford in the New York Times yesterday. You must all be so pleased. The reason I'm here is that I noticed in this morning's paper that you're proposing to activate the Stratford Housing Partnership. And I was interested and sort of pleased to see that, but I found some things not quite clear from the reporting in the article. So I wanted to check the text, to see what you were actually proposing. And I could not find it online. So what you just put out now is the first time I got a chance to read, but just from the, if it would be helpful to the public if, when you have an ordinance committee meeting, if the changes were linked or something on the, to a website or something. It was? Where? Because I went to the ordinance committee and and just all it had was the agenda, and I tried clicking on the agenda and it did not expand. And so I have no idea. I mean, I'm not terribly tech savvy, but I did try to find it.
Yes, it was originally published at the last town council meeting when it was referred to ordinance.
Well, but it appeared in the paper today for the public.
And it was appended to the agenda for tonight?
Well, but it
No,
was
that's okay.
not added in the agenda that's published in the online. It simply says new business and ordinance amending an ordinance amending an ordinance. It doesn't say what it is. It doesn't say what the changes are. It doesn't refer you to a document for the changes. All it does is list something that, unless I have the code in front of me, I can go to, but that still doesn't tell me what the changes are. So
As mentioned, it was part of the town council meeting that referred it to tonight's meeting, so it was available then, and I'm sorry you couldn't find it, but it was clearly published.
I just prefer it to be redundant. When it appears in an article on the front page of the paper, and you're going to try to say, oh, wonder what that is, I'd like to take a look at it. And then you try to find it. It isn't helpful if it isn't there. So that's all. But that's not really why I came. I really didn't come to be critical. I wanted to know, first of all, the term predatory affordable housing development. And I'm not sure that I know what is meant by predatory affordable housing development. So that would I'd be interested, I'm going to listen to your meeting, and I hope it's answered in the meeting.
Thank you.
And then I had a question. It said in the article that you're going to be activating the partnership to develop a long-range housing plan, and that sounds good. And then it says, but you're going to take away the authority and the power of the council or the town to acquire property for that purpose. It doesn't make sense to me that you're activating the housing partnership to do what we need in town, research and develop affordable housing, and then take away your power to acquire land if it's available. So
Thank you for your questions, and I'm sure that a lot of your concerns will be addressed after tonight's meeting. Tonight is just establishing the ordinance, and you should have some of those clarified after tonight.
I hope so, and I
Thank
thank
you.
you. I applaud your efforts.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak during the public hearing portion of this meeting? Hearing none,
Motion to adjourn.
I'm going to close the meeting at 7:06 p.m. And at 7:07 p.m., I'm going to call to order tonight's meeting of the Ordinance Committee. Is there I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes of September 23rd.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Pia, and seconded, Mr. O'Connor. Any discussion? All in favor? There's no unfinished or tabled business items, so we will move on to item 4, which is new business. Is there a motion?
Madam Dancho, I'll make a motion to approve an ordinance amending 5-61 through 5-67 of the Town Code, as stated in the agenda.
And is there a second? Mr. Perillo. So just to clarify, this is a motion to move this ordinance back to Town Council. We're not approving it tonight?
Correct. I'll restate my motion. Motion to approve.
To
move to the council with a favorable recommendation.
And you'll second that. Okay, thank you, everyone. And before we move on with discussion, I would like to recognize Attorney John Florek, who can give us some background on the edits that we're making on this partnership. He mentioned it at our last meeting. We didn't have a quorum at the time, but it was some clarification that I think some of you would like to hear, and as a benefit to our new members as well. So, Attorney Florek, please.
Yes. There are going to be other changes that I'm going to recommend based on the enabling state statute. But basically, changes are being made for technical reasons. When this ordinance was first drafted, it was like 1990. At that point in time, the chief elected official in Stratford was the council chairman. We didn't have a mayoral form of government. The enabling legislation that allows the creation of housing partnerships indicates that the appointments are made by the chief elected official. So back in 1990, that was the council chairman. Now it's the mayor. So you'll see 5-62 is being changed to reflect that. And the same with 5-63. Now, as we get into it, I'm going to recommend other changes with respect to 5-62 so that we can comply with the ordinance, or with the statute. But that is the biggest reason for the change. The other thing I wanted to point out right now is, and Sonia brought it up in her comments, the deletion of 5-65B, which takes away the power of the town council to acquire property. Well, it really doesn't. The town council has the power to acquire property for any reason pursuant to the charter. So the fact that it was in this particular ordinance is really neither here nor there. The council has that power anyhow. This particular ordinance also indicated that any action by the town council would not be subject to Chapter 35-1, 2, or 3. These ordinances used to control or set forth a procedure for the sale of town property. They have since been repealed. There is no 35-1, 35-2, and 35-3 anymore. There's just a 35-1. So there were certain corrections that probably needed to be made with respect to the text of this ordinance. And that was the driving force behind the proposed amendments that you have in front of you tonight. But as I said, as we get into it a little bit more, I'm going to be recommending some other things to bring it directly into compliance with the state enabling legislation, which, for the record, is 8-336F of the Connecticut General Statutes.
Through the chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Question for Attorney Flark. So, in summary, over the last couple of years, I know this council and the ordinance committee has been doing a lot of work on cleaning up old wording of textual language over the last 2.5 years. This just seems to me like it's bringing it up to speed. As you mentioned, at the time that this was written, we did not have a mayoral form of government. The council chair was in charge. We're now obviously moving that per the state statute that you just referenced, so that it coincides and works with it. Correct? Is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Okay.
In essence, that's the reason for it, because we had 2 charter revisions. The first one brought in the mayoral form of government. The second one, in 2008, clarified some things. Both of those charter revisions changed drastically who the chief elected official was and what the appointing power under the charter was of the mayor as opposed to the council. So while the charter revisions came into play, the ordinances were never changed. That didn't bother us in the town attorney's office so much, because the simple answer to that is you can't have an ordinance that conflicts with the charter. So if the ordinance conflicts with the charter provision is what rules. So we knew that, and that didn't bother us, but the public at large had no idea. And so every time you'd get questions from people saying, well, wait a minute, there's an ordinance that says A, B, and C, and you're not following it. Well, there's a reason we're not following it. So to clean it up, make it more transparent, make it more explainable, make it more understandable. A policy was and a procedure was adopted really by Margot, the council clerk, and Brian Leclerc to try to clean up some of these ordinances and bring them in accordance with the state law and with the charter as it exists now. So that's the driving force before it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for discussion? Councilor Can, go ahead.
Thank you, Laura. John, going to section 5.62.
Yes.
Membership. Changes under item G and item H.
Yes.
Are they related to the statute or the charter?
Well, I'm going to be recommending to you changes to some of this because as it's written now, it doesn't comply with the statute. But as my understanding, the reason for the recommended change, which reduces the membership of the business community and other members, is because the way the ordinance presently exists, it calls for 13 members. And my understanding is that the housing partnership was having great difficulty getting a quorum with that many people on the board. Well, which makes sense too, because we have another 13-member board in town, the pension board, and so those of you who serve at the pension board know that it's difficult at times to get a quorum to transact business. So I think the goal there was to reduce the number of people, to bring it down to a number which was more doable, which was less unwieldy. And that was the sentiment behind that. Now, the only place you can really take it from are the catch-all categories of business community or the other at-large members, which I'm going to explain to you in a minute, doesn't exist. The rest of the people on the partnership are required by statute. So you can't eliminate the mayor, you can't eliminate a representative of the planning commission, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if your goal is to reduce the number of people and try to make it a more active board, you can only take it from certain categories.
Thank you. Go ahead.
5-62F? Okay.
Who is the current community development administrator?
I believe it's Mary Dean, isn't it?
It's Chris Bandecki.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to change it to coordinator? Doesn't matter. Are there any other questions with regard to this ordinance? Councilor?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This is Attorney Floyd. 565A-2, where it says establish the price range for affordable housing.
Yes.
Are there any kind of parameters for that? How is that dictated or
There-
established?
There are no parameters in this ordinance or in the housing partnership enabling legislation. These are just goals and potential work performance for the housing partnership. So the housing partnership in and of itself does not pass anything, does not approve anything, does not have the force of any law. But it is a recommendatory body. It studies the housing problem. Once it's designated as an active and lawfully, validly established a board, pursuant to the statute, the Department of Housing makes available to it certain resources which help identify the need, identify parcels of property that may be available, and provides information which the partnership can use to recommend the price range of affordable housing, et cetera, et cetera. This is not directly tied in with the 8-30G affordable housing that we keep hearing about.
I would like to recognize Jay Hibansky to come to the podium and maybe give us some background.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jay Hibansky, Planning and Zoning Administrator here for the town, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Councilman Taveras talked about the affordability piece of this partnership ordinance and how affordable housing is set by statute and what the median income levels, et cetera, are.
Sure, and Attorney Florick is more than welcome to chime in as well. So in order for a project to qualify for an affordable housing project pursuant to the statute 8-30G, 30% of a project needs to provide affordable housing. This is for a straight residential project. Of that 30%, half need to be 80% of the household median income for the community. The other half need to be 60% of the household median income for the community.
Thank you.
But again, this housing partnership is not directly tied to 8-30G. So it does not, it's not establishing a price range of affordable housing which necessarily fits within the definition of the statute for 8-30G.
Correct.
Those price ranges and income ranges are set forth in 8-30G, and in order to qualify under that statute and to have the powers that are given under that statute to shift the burden of proof from the applicant to the town, et cetera, the particular project proposed under 8-30G has to meet those criteria, not necessarily for the recommendations of the housing partnership.
And I see this section 5-65, number 2, as really an exploratory option for the housing partnership to explore what's the range. I mean, the state has its own version as to what's affordable housing, and I think this tasks the housing partnership to verify that, to see, is it just that number? Is it a range between X and Y that we really feel makes our housing stock affordable?
Thank you both for your expertise. As mentioned, we're establishing the housing partnership tonight, and then the items under 5-65 are tasks that the committee will determine. And go ahead, you have another question.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Jay, I want to clarify what you mentioned regarding 830G, and then a follow-up question to affordable housing in general. 30% of affordable housing project need to be affordable, but half of those, when you say 80% of median income, does that imply that at least 80% of the households can afford that rent or that cost of housing?
That means that that percentage of 80%, so, and it's hard to explain. So you have to imagine, for example, you have a 100-unit development. 30 of those are going to have to be by statute deed restricted as affordable, right? So you've got these 30 units here. You take that 30 and you split it in half, and you have a pot of applicants who have to earn or cannot earn more than 80% of the household median income for the town. The other half, the other 15, cannot earn more than 60% of the household median income for the town. Does that answer clarify?
It does, because it clarifies that both 80% is 20% below the median income.
Correct.
And then the follow-up question is, in your experience, if you can, what medium income would be used by a town outside of 830G in, for example, that might be considered? Would we say we want, if we were to do an affordable housing, would we want it to be 60% of medium income? Is there a standard that other municipalities tend to use when they're not restricted by 830G?
Well, I think every town does it differently. Every municipality will do it differently. I think you'll see developers are going to want more at 80% because that's more for their bottom dollar, right? I think the trend, at least in terms of what municipalities are wanting, as well as planning offices, you know, there's a big push for mixed income housing. So you don't want, in my opinion, I don't think you want one of everything. I think that the more you can disperse that, the income within a residential development, the better off that development is. So I would say I would follow the mix that the statute is proposing.
Thank you.
One question for Attorney Flora. Are you going to be proposing
Yes.
Are you proposing amendments tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
And if we could, before you get in, Bill, while Jay's still here, one of the members of the Housing Partnership pursuant to the statute is a representative of the Zoning Commission. And I understand you had some comments about that person, who that person should not be, and if you could share them with the council.
Sure. Well, and it wasn't so much a concern, but it's something that, as the ordinance, our town councilors making decisions on these things, I think it's something that you might want to be aware of. And it's, what type of, who we're selecting as that representative. A big part of what we do, my office does in conjunction with the assistance from the town attorney's office, is making sure that we're not creating any liability from the town's perspective about predetermination or bias. A lot of these, some of these representatives from the land use boards, like the zoning commission, zoning board of appeals, or planning commission, may have an affordable housing project in front of them at some point. And I think, and this is speculation, and so I'm trying to be cautious because that's part of what I do, is to just ensure that whoever we select, we have to make sure that those folks are educated, that they cannot be making statements as part of the Stratford Housing Partnership that would jeopardize a decision or how they are going to be making decisions on an application that might come before them when they're on the zoning commission.
Thank you.
That may just be myself being a little bit too conservative, and I would defer to the town attorney's office whether or not that's a legitimate concern or not, but it was just something that I thought was worth mentioning.
Thank you. I think Councilor Poisson had a question.
Yes, Attorney Florek, is the word predatory anywhere on these pages?
No, it's not. And I read that article in the Post this morning also, and it was and I'm going to read it again when I go home, but what struck me this morning was that there was at least implied linkage between the housing partnership and the revisions to the housing partnership and some type of a moratorium on 8-30G development. Well, there's nothing in the housing partnership that talks about 8-30G or any of that type of development. The housing partnership has no powers over that. There is a moratorium procedure in the statute, but that is a very complicated statute which requires a point system, and the town has to gather a certain number of points for different types of developments, and then you can apply for it. But that has absolutely nothing to do with the housing partnership. They're apples and oranges, two different things.
Thank you.
Through the chair,
Yes.
I'll make a motion. Can I make a motion? Mr. Florek had some amendments. I guess the motion would be to hear the
So you have a motion on the
amendments.
table, and you feel free to make an
Let me point, I don't want to belabor it, but let me go over a couple of things and point things out to you. First of all, and I want to deal with 5-62. Now again, remember that that under this this ordinance, the mayor is going to be the appointing authority. And that is because the enabling legislation 8-633F states that the appointing authority is the chief elected official of the town. So going down the list of proposed partnership members, the first one is the mayor or her representative. Now, I hate to task the mayor with even more than she has to do, but there is nothing in that statute that allows the chief elected official of the town to appoint a representative to serve on the body. There are with respect to most other appointments, there are, but not with respect to the mayor. And the way we usually analyze statutes is, if you say it in one place and you don't say it in another, you must have had a reason not to say it in the other. And so I think the mayor has to be appointed to this particular board. I think that she has to be a member of the housing partnership. I'm going to go through a number of them. Next, 5-62C. It says a representative of the zoning commission or the zoning board of appeals. The statute requires it to be a representative of the zoning commission, not the zoning board of appeals. Now, you may be able to appoint somebody from the zoning board of appeals under another category, but it's got to be a representative of the zoning commission. Now, when I say representative, it's up to you and the people involved as to who you appoint. It does not have to be a zoning commissioner. It can be an alternate. It can be a zoning official. But it's got to be someone as a representative of the zoning commission. You also need to appoint, pursuant to the statute, a representative of the Inland Wetlands Commission. That's required by the statute. So you need to add that. Right now, 5-62D appoints the town planner. That's fine, but there is no requirement that the town planner be appointed. Town planner can qualify as a local urban planning and land use professional, which is required under the statute, but doesn't appear here in any other place. Again, in E, we appoint the executive director of the Housing Authority. That's fine, but it does not have to be the executive director. It has to be a representative of the Housing Authority. We appoint the community development administrator in subparagraph F, and in the statute, it refers to the representative of any local community development agency. So appointing the community development administrator is fine. Again, it just needs to be a representative of that office. We're appointing one member of the local business community, and then in H, 2 members at large. There is no at-large category under the enabling statute. What the enabling statute says is you need to have a representative of a public interest group or groups, such as housing advocates, members of the clergy, members of local civic groups, and representatives of local nonprofit corporations. So those are specific people that must be designated. In other words, someone who's designated must belong to one of those groups. You can appoint at-large members of the electorate that don't fall into any of those categories, but if you're going to do so, you're going to increase the membership above 9, because you've got a lot of categories that need to be filled pursuant to the statute.
So I have a question on C in that category.
Yes.
So you said the zoning commission, a representative of the zoning commission, are you saying and inland wetlands?
No, yes, and inland wetlands. Those are 2 categories that must be appointed. The zoning board of appeals does not.
So that's a 10th person, isn't it?
It's a representative of the inland wetlands. I mean, it could be a member of the commission. It could be a member of the office.
So that should say zoning commission or inland wetlands.
So it should say, in my opinion, 5-62A, you should delete the words "or his/her representative" after mayor.
Right.
B is fine. C, you should delete everything after zoning commission.
Okay.
D, the town planner is not required pursuant to the statute to be appointed to the housing partnership. However, the statute does require someone as a representative of a local urban planning, land use, and/or housing professional. So obviously, the planner is certainly a land use professional, and you could appoint her under that umbrella.
Okay.
The executive director of the housing authority needs to remain. It does not have to be the executive director. It simply has to be a representative of the housing authority. In F, community development administrator is fine. There needs to be added an inland wetlands representative of the Inland Wetlands Commission. And then you can deal with the local business community and the public interest groups under the umbrella of at-large if you want to, but you're going to have to count the number of people you've appointed because it may change the mix overnight.
Right. So it sounds like we have to figure out a way to eliminate maybe one person from the at-large.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Who made all these red line changes that we're looking at tonight?
I think the red line changes were made by Margot, and I think Brian looked at it, but I think it was just, and again, in order to get the ordinance in line with the appointing authority was
Right,
the big thing.
So my real question is this a very time-sensitive thing, or maybe we should table this and it could be rewritten with all the changes that you're requesting, and then we could take it up again next month?
We could certainly do that, but I don't know if, Mayor Hoydick, do you have any comment on the time sensitivity of this?
I do. So we started this last term to get this done because we don't have a housing partnership, and by state statute we should have one. The housing partnership's responsibility is to set the plan of housing for the town of Stratford. And as we move forward with the center school development, the El Grasso development, and other housing projects proposals that are being proposed to the zoning commission, the planning commission, possibly Board of Zoning Appeals, inland wetlands, conservation, I think we need the game plan or the plan or some kind of criteria. And just like we have a plan of conservation development, we have a park and rec plan, we have the waterfront and harbor management, we have plans in all these disciplines. We're missing the housing plan. And it's really important to our community to have an affordable housing plan.
No, I totally agree. There's so many, we're talking about so many changes here that I just thought it might be better just to look at them again, all printed out in front of us instead of John just reading them off. That was my only thought. I mean, I definitely agree we need this. I didn't know if we needed it tonight.
I think maybe we can move this forward to the town council meeting that we're going to have in February, and then we can also talk about making more clarifications or changes to the memberships at that time.
Yeah, you can do that. I mean, you don't have to report a finished product out of the ordinance committee. That you can do that work at council level if you want.
So it sounds like from my notes, if we add the inland wetlands person, then one person, we need to combine G and H maybe and make it 2 people. And then that would bring it down to 9.
Yeah, don't forget, one of those people needs to be a member of a public interest
Okay.
group. Not just at large, a member of a public interest
Go ahead,
group
Mayor.
of some sort.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm counting 9. The mayor, a representative from the Planning Commission, a representative from the Zoning Commission, a representative from Inland Wetlands, an urban planner professional, a representative from the Housing Authority, Community Development Agency, a local business, and the interest groups could be among the rest, clergy, local civics groups, nonprofits. So I have 9.
This says 2 members, though.
It's not needed.
But
Yeah,
the
you'd
but
have
the
to change that
But the
count.
statute doesn't say 2 members.
No, the statute doesn't, the proposed ordinance does, so you'd have to change the count on that category if you're looking at a 9-member board.
So we would change it from 2 to 1? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't do the math, but if that's what it comes out, yes.
Count it up.
Madam Chair, may I again? I guess my point is it would have been a lot easier for us to move this tonight if we had all these changes in front of us in written form.
No, I mean, it's basically just an outline, really, of what the committee should look like.
But Attorney Florek just went over some very pointed stuff that's required by the charter and other areas, and they're not listed in front of us. We're just hearing it orally. I'm just saying it would have been better, John, if we had these in writing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Hold it.
Thank you, Chairman. John, under item G that says 1 member of the local business community,
Yes,
is that required?
yes.
It doesn't have to be a nonprofit or any type of business?
That would come more under the special interest groups. The statute actually says representatives of the local business community, such as local bankers, realtors, and/or developers.
Can I pose a question to Jay?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Jay, maybe in your experience, we're favorably towards 9 members of this committee for quorum especially. We've had subcommittees for other development initiatives. Do you know of other municipalities that may have a subcommittee that may be more of an umbrella for community members at large, other nonprofits, other business members, that would advise the partnership?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Can you repeat it again?
We're favoring 9 members for this. I have a prejudice of having more involvement across the community. Have other municipalities achieved that through having a subcommittee that would work as a secondary committee to the partnership that would then provide feedback and recommendations to help flesh out some of the partnership's ideas?
I think that would all depend on the makeup of the housing partnership itself. You know, how proactive those members are, and you know how far they're willing to drill down on the projects that they're working on. I don't think it would be necessary, and that's just speaking from my personal perspective. I don't know exactly what every other, or I'm not sure what other municipalities are doing, whether or not they have a subcommittee to this housing partnership. I just know that it's hard to get people to come to meetings, and it's hard to find additional folks. I mean, I have meetings where I have 5 regular members, and those are tough to get people to. So that would be my only thought. It's hard to get more folks involved, but it would depend on how proactive I think the housing partnership appointees are.
Thank you, Jay. I understand. For the fellow committee members, that if we had many members of nonprofits or many members of the business community that were able to provide input, then we may get a rounder, more representative set of solutions. I do understand the need for a quorum, and that all the members are now generally coming from the town agencies, and it's not allowing much representation from outside what I'll call the structure of the administration, which isn't bad. It's just maybe having that contrary view or that more representative view, if we would consider 11 members, but I do understand.
We don't,
9 is defined? Oh, well, we could have 2 members of the local business community and 2 members at large, and that may give us 11. That's what I was implying.
So, we have a motion on the floor, and we have some amendments that have been proposed.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, I'd like to make a motion to amend as stated per Attorney Floric, and I'll go through them, and if Attorney Floric and yourself can double check me.
I don't think, hold on one second. I
Sure.
think we have some more amendments.
Okay.
So I have
I'll withdraw.
questions on how, after the appointments are made, about the temporary chair and the bylaws being adopted. I don't see anywhere in statute where it references that, and I don't know any other boards or commissions that have bylaws like this referenced.
Well,
It's in 5-63.
5-63?
It says. Yep. He, meaning the mayor, shall appoint a temporary chairman until such time as the bylaws are adopted and the officers are elected for the partnership. The town planner shall serve as the secretary. As much as it dismays me not to agree with Ken, but I do agree with Ken that I think there's a lot of things that we need to work out in this ordinance, and maybe we should just keep going through it and
Can you say that again?
circle back. Yes, I know. My husband says this all the time. Did you agree with me? Yes, I do agree with you, Ken.
I don't know, Mayor Wade, this partnership was actually formed 30 years ago. I know it hasn't met in a long time, but it's never been dissolved either. I don't know whether they did adopt bylaws at some point in time.
Is this something we can move forward with and then just make further amendments at the next council meeting when it gets referred back to us?
Well, I think
In
we
February.
can do that. You can, but we're going to need some direction, as to how to go with the, some of the competing discussions we've had regarding who should make up the membership and how many people there should be on it. There are, a few more changes that probably need to be made. For example, in 5-65, 5-65A, 5, it says one of the duties of this housing partnership is to review applicable zoning regulations to determine whether such regulations restrict the development of affordable housing in the community, and identify and recommend to the council any necessary changes to such regulations. Well, that's nice, except the council doesn't make the changes to those regulations. The zoning commission does. So
That should be,
that probably should be changed. You may want to include a definition of affordable, because when you use the term affordable housing, 8-30G is very unfortunate that they chose to call it the Affordable Housing Statute, because the Affordable Housing Statute as defined in 8-30G is not necessarily this. So for the purposes of the housing partnership, you may want to create a new definition of affordability. And then you'll probably want to take a look at 5-66, which was a super powerful provision which said that if the council passed any ordinance with respect to this particular ordinance, or any resolution with respect to the housing partnership, it would supersede any other resolution, order, ordinance, etc. in town. You may want to take a look at that. And last but not least, 5-67, you may want to take a look at the terms, because you appoint some of the people for terms that are coterminous with their elected status, others for a specific amount of time, 4 years, 3 years, etc. So you may want to take a look at all of those things.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to weigh in and go back to what Ken said. I think this needs to be tabled. There's too many things here that are hanging.
Agree.
If this goes to council, we're not going to do it. It needs to be cleaned up before it comes to council.
so there's a motion on the floor right now to send it to council with a favorable recommendation, and that was seconded, and we've had discussion. So do we need to resolve that motion first?
Yeah, there is a motion on the floor, so that needs to be voted on unless it's withdrawn.
Madam Chair, I'll withdraw that motion.
Thank you. Counselor Pia, do I hear another motion?
Well,
make a-
somebody's got to withdraw the second, too.
Withdraw the second?
Who was it? Bill? Were you-
That was Bill? You withdraw your second? Okay. Is there another motion?
Madam, I'll make a motion to table this, and when we come back next meeting, all the changes that the attorney just told us orally need to be written out in front of us, because there's lots of changes. And since the mayor agreed with me, I'll just say there's even more, that if we change A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and make those 9 people, those people are referred to on the second page under 5-67, and those would have to be changed. So this is way too much to do orally, and I wish we had this in writing, so next month, let's do it. I have a motion to table, please.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Attorney Florek and John Habansky, for your comments. And I need a motion to...
Motion to adjourn.
Motion, is there a second? Second by Mr. O'Brien. Yes. And all in favor? Thank you.